Hello and welcome back. We're going to continue with our Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine and continue off from where we were on Saturday. So on Saturday we worked on the minimap. So if we just play, we can see now that we have the minimap up in the top left hand corner, and that map is generated based on the map data that we've put in a data table. So we can change it when we need to change the map. I haven't gone through and defined all of the maps because that will obviously take some time. It obviously would be fairly tedious to watch as well. So I'll fill that in once we've actually settled on the structure that's going to be, because the map data is currently stored, where did I put it in here, as a data table of islands. I've got to get the terminology right, so they are the islands of the game, as the game calls them, and we're currently storing them as the name, the epoch, be it 1, 2, 3 all the way up to 10, the biome so that we can use the correct tile set, and the well, basically the individual sprites for each location of the map. So we've got 16 elements within our array, 0 to 15, and I've actually populated the appropriate places with the appropriate sprite. Now that worked kind of... Hello Darabelle. So that worked to get us on, kind of get us going, but it's not going to be flexible enough to really move forward with. So we're going to, the main goal for today is to try and get the minimap to work with our selection, so we can select the actual minimap locations, and hopefully we can update the slate, as it's called. But to translate this tile that we have here within the minimap to the slate, we're going to need to know more than just simply what sprite we use to render it. Now we've already populated a different data table with sectors. There are individual pieces and we've named them all. Separate all the windows, and we've named them all in here. Now one issue that we did touch upon earlier on was that this column is the name column, or the index column, however you want to refer to it. Unreal Engine refers to it as the name column, whereas typically in databases is an index column. But the problem with that is it's kind of freeform text. When we want to reference something from it, we can either get all of the names from the data table, or we can get a specific row using a specific name that we have to provide as text. Now to translate that item into an image, we then need to know that we need to be able to convert. Well, we don't have anything to convert, I guess that's the problem, isn't it? We've got a sprite, which we know, and we've got a name, but there's no relationship between that sprite and the name, and it's not even used correctly within the islands. So that kind of broadly outlines the problem, and what we're going to try and address. I know there's probably many ways in which we can solve it, so again, with the process of learning and trying to figure out what ways we can do different things, and then obviously moving forward what way is going to be the best. And now the way that I've planned it out is that we will create, as we kind of touched upon again in very early stream, a enumeration to hold our island types. Is that perhaps potentially that enumeration then could be used elsewhere, but that's probably not actually the best approach. I did have a thought as I was kind of going through it, there might be a better way. Now we can add to this sectors data table with the individual sprites that each individual thing, each individual sector type uses. Now we know that certain sectors, if we go into our sprites, not for the, so this definitely going to have to clean up the naming at some point. For our sprites for the minimap, all these individual pieces, some of them are used, some of them represent the same place within the map. So we can see that we've got this one here, for example, is our, what we've referred to it in this list as our bottom set piece, because it's only accessible from the bottom. And then we've got, again, that same piece here as 15 instead of 3, and it's in a different texture. Now, ideally, what we could do moving forward is really just simplify all of these to one set of sprites, perhaps the white one or whatever color we so choose, and then dynamically color them based on how we're using them. That's kind of an ultimate goal, and then we basically can use any piece for any map style. But at the moment, since we're focusing on actually recreating the islands and such from within the original game, we don't need to worry too much about that. But that does mean that we're going to have multiple columns within this context. Or if we didn't have multiple columns, we'd have to have some way to know which piece to use. And that might actually work out quite well. So we'll go down that line. So we know we have multiple biomes, as we've called them. So we'll create a new data, new enumeration. Where is the enumeration one? Blueprints, enumeration. And we'll call this our biome. I think that's correct. That's as we spelled it before. And for our biome, we'll go back to our minimap sprites, and we'll just create an item within this enumeration for each of the different sprites. Now, there's no real reason to do these in any particular order, so I'll just do them however the sprites have turned out. So it'll be desert and grass, mud, snow, I think we'll go for this darker brown one as volcanic. The darker green one will be a forest. That's the case. And the grey one will be moon. Or dust. Dust sounds cooler. Okay, and we can apply those enumerations to our biome column by changing the, this is an island blueprint. So again, a bit disorganized with what's what, but we find our island structure and we can change the biome from a string to an enumeration. And the enumeration list is quite long, so luckily with our biome being B, it's right at the top, but you can just simply type and search. But for now, we'll just be able to select it. And we will, it picks a default. Again, we don't really mind. Save that. And then we can change the biomes for each of our already defined types. So this will be, first one is mud, second one is grass, and third one is snow. So that sorts out the biome side of it. And the purpose of that is so that now we don't have to specify specifically which sprite to use within this context. But to really make use of that, we need to go back to our sectors data table and add to this the individual sprites for the individual sectors. So bring up our sprites. And we're going to put the sprites in the same order that the enumerations are, because the enumerations can relate to an integer value. So desert would be 0, dust would be whatever that would be, 7. So we'll put, we need our sectors structure, that one there, and we'll add another variable, and we'll call this sprites, and this is going to be an array of sprites. It wasn't a socket. Let's just make sure I get the right data type from the one we used before. Paper sprite is what I used in that case. Paper sprite. There we go. That one there. And then save that. Jump back over to our sectors data table, and we'll add to this all of the sprites that are related to that particular part in the order that they are, shown up in our list here. Make this window a bit smaller so we can see it. This is going to be a bit of a tedious task, so I'm going to focus on the ones that we need for the mud area, and I'll leave the others and perhaps do them all out offline, because once we've seen it a few times, it's not going to be that interesting. So we know that our mud one here, again, we've labeled them based on where you can enter, so we can enter on the bottom. So we go to the find our bottom one, and we need to add the appropriate elements within the array to fill the entire lot, obviously only up to the point of where we know it fills. In this case, the mud one can be in some of the sets, but it's definitely in the last set, so we need the full array set. So we'll add an array for the desert, an array element for the desert, for the grass, for the mud, for the snow, for the volcanic and the forest, and our dust. So just so this is complete, that's 54, and then our mud was 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, and our mud one is 15. So all the other elements which don't have it, now we know it has a desert, so we can fill in the desert as well. We'll get one complete at least. Can find the desert. Fortunately, there's lots of these. There we go, that's the one. But we know there's no grass version of this particular land, so that one's always going to be a non-image. But as I say, we could go through and fill them all in, but we're just focused on what we need at the moment for this particular one. So now we'll do the next one, and that one's a top. So we'll only just do this one, because again, it's quite a lot of them to fill in, and we certainly don't want to spend the time doing the filling in all of these things to find out that the process isn't going to work. I haven't pre-done this. I'm kind of doing as I go along, so there's no guarantee that everything will be 100% working. So you certainly don't want to spend the time filling out all of the sprites in this sector thing, and as I say, all of them, the islands even, until we know that the data is shaped the way we want. I don't know if there's any way to export this kind of data. I think it might be quite difficult with the sprites, because obviously they're referencing an element within the editor, so we can't import it into something that will make that quicker. So we're kind of restricted to the interface, which isn't too bad for Unreal Editor. For kind of editing the data tables, it's quite good compared to some, but it certainly doesn't have a lot of ease of use features to kind of speed the process up, because I don't think they're designed for really kind of constant changing data, even if you're only changing it on the editor level. Anyway, so we've now defined our sectors for the top and the top and the bottom item, and we've put the sprites in place so that we know which sprite to use, and we've changed our island to reference a biome, and now rather than referencing the sprite itself, we're going to simply reference a sector. But because the sector is not actually enumeration or anything, it's just going to be a name. Now by doing that, it's immediately blanked everything that I had in the column before, so we best hope this way is going to be useful. So we have to try and make sure we get the right elements again. Ooh, added a whole bunch there. So we know we need 15. Again, we don't necessarily need anything after the ones we're actually going to populate, because it should never reference anything. But because of the way the array works, we do need the empty items to actually fill that up. We may actually be able to bypass that or make that a bit cleaner. Can never remember the difference that they do with sets or maps, so I'm just going to go for a map. And we're going to have a name, which is the name of the sector from this data table. And, oh no, the other way around. We're going to have an integer and a name. The integer references where, the name references what. So now, doing it that way, we only actually need to say, this map piece is the, and we count from 0 here, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th item. And we know that the one we filled in is the top. And we have another one, so if that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. Oops. And that's just bottom. So that's our two pieces, and doing it as a map means that we only actually have to define the ones we want rather than having to find a whole array. Potential downside is that if the code is wrong, it might reference places that don't exist and it might break, might crash, but I think they'll probably protect against that, so it'll just show an error. So now we need to go to our minimap, because the minimap code, again, as we did it on Saturday, we've actually implemented it within the actor, not the widget, because of all the scaling issues that we were having. We'll definitely revisit the widget side of things, see if that works, see if there's any benefits, but we also need to try and work on the widget for the actual user interface menu. So that might help to learn how to do the scaling better and make it work correctly. So, because we've changed certain parts of the data, Unreal Editor, like for this particular one, we're getting the data table row from the islands. So if we jump back over to, we'll put this one actually back there, and we'll put this one at the main page. Yeah. So our islands, we've changed the map from being an array of sprites to now being an array of integers and names. So it's left the old one in place so that you can kind of see how that's all tied up, but it's put the new one down, and it's obviously stating there's an error to say that particular pin doesn't actually exist in that current form. So let's see how we can iterate over a map. We can't. Maybe that's half the problem here. If we can't iterate over the map, then that's not going to work very well. So we can iterate over an enum, and we can iterate over an array, but it doesn't look like we can iterate over a name. So we'll see what options it has against a map. So we can add, clear, contains, find, get the keys. Okay, so what we'll want to do in this case is get the keys of our map, and the keys will return an array of integers, which we can then iterate over. So we're just going to leave the old code, not too far there with the selecting. Oops. Just going to leave the old code a bit higher up so it's out of the way. Now, so we're iterating over each of the keys, and therefore for each of those keys we're going to have a number, and that number is going to relate to which position it is. So before we were having an index number of 1 to 15 that we had to do the modulus of and the division of to find the location in this set. But now we don't have that. We just have an integer of 1 or 6. So that means our naming that we've used here isn't going to work very well. So what we could do, because this naming makes some sense, and because the requirements for our island structure and our island data table are open to change, we don't necessarily need to reference it by 6 and 10. We could reference it if we change the key to a string, yep, and then go back over here. Again, we've got to re-add them. That's why we don't want to do too many until we get it right. Yep. So we want to add another one. In this case, rather than simply saying 6 as we did before, we're actually going to refer to the right map component based on our grid reference that we've got here. So we find our grid reference as 112, so it's the first row, the second column, starting from 0. So that's 0, 1, 2, and then 1 down, or 1 down and 2 across. So we'll do 12, and then again that's the top. And then in this case the next one's 22, and that's the bottom. So doing it this way, we don't care that there's a whole bunch of gap numbers between there, because it's not incremental, they're just keys. They could be numbers as we've got them, which are actually represented almost as strings probably internally, or they could be strings themselves and so on. Oh, actually we do have them as strings, but they could be anything, depending on the context and the data that you've got. But using that, we use the same I have to get rid of that keys call. Use keys there. And that keys call is going to give us an array of strings, which is going to be 12, 22, so on and so forth. And we're then going to iterate over those keys. And for each array element, we're only going to have the key for our set. So we're going to have to get our set again and use the find method. Let me just check that's the right one again. See if there's a better utility for that. Add, contains, length, make to array. No, so I think that's find, I think, is the one we want. Non-context sensitive. Find. For some reason I thought it was a set, but it was a map. No wonder I can't find what I'm looking for. Just make sure we're using the right appropriate call. Yeah, so map's got an add method, clear, contains, find, keys or length, or an array of values. Could actually do it this way rather than finding, because we could find by the name, but because we know where we are in the index of the keys, we could probably just convert all of the values to an array, convert all of the keys to an array, which we do in those two cases, and then from that array, let's just get index, utilities, oops, array, get, using that same index. And that will, because we're iterating over a list of keys here and a list of values there, the list of so we just want to put that in the middle just so that it doesn't convert it multiple times, and then that over there. So for each item in the body we want to get our name, and that's the name from the data table of sectors, this one over here, and the index is the map piece that we want. So we know for the map piece we have to iterate through all of them. So this kind of too much again. This component here is really just getting all of the including that bit, getting all of the map bits and iterating over them. So again, we'll just take that, move that out the way, and break the link. So we're just keeping that around just in case, but I don't think we're going to need it. So at the moment we know that the key is going to be, if we go back over here, it's trying to keep up and keep remembering what everything is. The key is the number or the string that represents our sector part. So we need to do the same comparison that we did over here to find the right thing. So I seem to have lost that equals in the change. Connect that up, and the object name we lost as well. Did not do a good job of copying that. Because it came from the bottom part of the branch, which I didn't actually need. Nonetheless, tie everything up. So that iterates over all of these children items and compares its name with the key value. So this array element here needs to compare to that one there. It's a bit far. So we're comparing the name of this to the key value from the here. So it's either was kind of obviously 12 and 22, which is actually one row 1, column 2, and so on and so forth. Now once we've found the right one, we want to set the sprite, and the sprite actually comes from our sectors data table. This component here is going to return us the name of the sector we want to use. So we actually want to get the data table for get data table row using that name for the sectors, and then we want to, if we found that row, how do we want to set this up? Just whichever order the code works. So we're looping through our main things, our main values in this case, no, our keys in this case, looping through our keys. For each of those keys, we kind of know that the sector row is going to exist, so we can just straight off do that. If that row is found, then we iterate over our children items, and the out row for the data table, which is the sprite. We need to split that. Now we have an array of sprites, and the array of sprites actually represent the biomes. So mostly emphasized by our bottom section, where we've actually done quite a few of them. And our biome is actually here in our data table for the island, but our sprites is actually an array of integers, so we're going to have to convert that to an integer. It'll probably do it itself when we got it right. So we want to get from the array of sprites, context sensitive again, array, can we not get a reference? I'll get a copy, should be fine. So we can just tie up the biome enum to our integer. Nope, we can't. How do we convert it to an int? There we go. Now we can tie it up. And that gives us the sprite we want, which we should hopefully be able to tie into there. Okay, great. We don't care about any of the top, bottom, right, left side of things, because that determines how this particular sector can connect. But perhaps what we do want to know is which sector is which within our actual islands. Our paper sprite components don't know which sector they're in. To be able to select it and then be able to know which one we're using, that's something that we might have to know. But we're going to find out first if all of these changes that we've just done actually work. So our minimap our minimap is currently set to use which map by default? That's in the way. The Sealer map, and that one we haven't implemented. We've only implemented the Allura map, the very first one. So we want to take from our islands, just organise these sectors and sector. From our islands, we want to take the Allura one. That's the only one that's going to work at the moment. And we define that there. Compile that, and hopefully when we play, we'll almost see the island we want in there. For some reason I got the ups and downs the wrong way around. Let's play it again. So we can see that our top is actually on the bottom and our bottom is actually on the top. Figure out why that is. We say 12 is the top. If we go to the viewpoint port, 12 is the top, 22 is the bottom. So as far as I can tell, that works. So now we best check that top and bottom are the ones that we actually think they should be. So we'll jump over to our sectors, and our top, oh actually that's the bottom image, isn't it? And our bottom is the top. Yes, because we're saying which way can you enter. So the images are actually right. What we did wrong was we described the map part, or the sector of the map, as being kind of what the image looks like rather than the way you enter it. So these are actually the wrong way round. It should be bottom and top. And that's where the issue was. It's one of those things that I'll probably always get wrong first time, but now we can see that they work correctly. And the next thing we need to do is go into the details of all of our map section, or map parts, and just make them hidden by default. So we look for the visibility somewhere around here. Where's it gone? Rendering, that's why I couldn't find it. So in the rendering we make it invisible. It makes it a little bit hard to work with, which is why we don't tend to do it. But now when we play, we don't see anything. Okay, what I did before, I think, was not make them invisible, but just clear the sprite like that. The problem with doing that is obviously we won't get to see what's what. So what we can do is instead add a bit here just to clear them all for us. Now I don't know, I think we tried before to set the sprite to a non-sprite. But I don't think that's going to work. It's just going to say you haven't selected a sprite. So far so good. Let's see if it does that. Okay, yeah, great. So that works. That clears the sprite, so our default editor sprite that we're using is invisible, and then actually sets the sprite correctly for the ones we actually want to see. So we've effectively redone the map. It now works again, but hopefully it's now got enough information for us to, I'll leave that out actually because that could be a function in the end, has enough information to generate the map with less repetition within the data tables. So our island data table actually only contains the information that each one needs, and our sector data table again just talks about or just references the sprites which that particular sector needs. But now we need to make the what we have called the select mark to actually go over the top of the place we've selected. So what we first need to do is figure out how to get the mouse to show, because every time I run it, it's not there. So every time I run it and actually click focus within the game area, then the mouse disappears, which is unhelpful. There must be a setting somewhere to keep the mouse visible. It may be in the player controller. Blueprints. That's a game mode blueprint, level blueprint. Maybe we need to create. For some reason I think that it's a player controller blueprint, I think. Show mouse cursor, there we go. So created to do that, show mouse cursor is the one we wanted. That's in the player controller. So to actually have the player controller, we had to create our own player controller. There may have been a way to change the default player controller. Here, edit player controller. Oh, that's editing the code. We didn't want to do that. So let's wait until that finishes loading and get rid of it. It's the first time I think I've loaded Visual Studio, so it's gonna take a minute to go away again. Still trying to load our file needlessly because I just want to close it. There we go. Go away. So yeah, we can get to the play controller here, but we can't do anything more than just edit the code of it. So that one didn't help, and now we need to set our default play controller. Now I know we can do that too. Again, so we have to create our custom game mode to change the player controller, but we'll definitely be going into the game mode and the player controllers, blueprints and all that later on anyway, so it's not really a problem. Defaults. So we go into the class defaults of our game mode and we simply change the player controller. Perhaps calling it player controller and game mode probably wasn't the best choice, given that's the name that everything else uses. So we'll just call it MLM player controller and MLM. I don't like it as in a lowercase m. Back. So now we should be able to distinguish them from the others. So we'll select the game mode class to be the game mode we want. Save that. And then in the game mode, we select our player controller. Compile and save all that. Now we should, when played and clicked, we still get our mouse within the game. That's going to allow us to click on our sectors. So we can jump back into our minimap, and we have here an event for clicking on one of the many sprites. Now because all of the sprites are pre-added, we could add events for each of those. I don't know if we can have an event for the actor itself. Event. So let's have a look what kind of things we have. Event actor unclicked. See where that does. Nothing. So if it's not there, so that's clicking on the actor, kind of probably the whole thing as it is. But we want to click on the individual ones. It would be nice if we could handle that click kind of generically on the whole actor level. But it doesn't look like that's possible in the way that we've tied this together anyway. I think there's probably a better way to create this minimap actor anyway. Maybe we could dynamically add all of these and then dynamically listen to their events so that we wouldn't have to do it all manually. But for now we can select one. So we know actually we only really need to work with 12 for the time being, again just to confirm that the whole process is going to work. And so that's number 12. and 22, I think it was. Jump back over here, 12 and 22, and one click. So in both of these cases, we'll just print a string, again just to confirm. So it does, funnily enough, each component here has a touched component, which is probably the one that's been clicked. It just would have been nice if we could have had that from the slightly higher level, but we'll do some investigation, see if there's a way to do that. But for now, that doesn't work still. So what's causing it not? Something stopped that event, click event, from actually working. I don't know if active's got anything to do it, so we'll make it, we might make 0, 0 active, we'll make 12 and 22. Make them active, see if that makes any difference. Nope. What other events have we got? Things over here, so we'll just move them over here. We'll try it over, see if it even recognises the cursor going over it. Nope. This is unhelpful. 12. Oh, I know I auto activate it, so that should almost definitely say something. Yeah, so it's active, whatever that means. And still no response from the mouse. That might have something to do with it. Enable click events right after show mouse cursor. Enable mouse over events. We probably do want those actually, moving forwards. And click event keys, left mouse button and right mouse button would be nice. Default mouse cursor. We'll keep that with the default. Okay, that might actually make it work. Yes, so we get the over now. Not when we go over the bottom, but when we go over the top. So we can take those off, I think. Actually, we can take those off. Oops. So the hello works when we click, but the begin over on 12 doesn't seem to change the cursor. we didn't need that anyway. That will be a nice to have, nice to do later. For now, we just want the click event to work on 12 and 22, which we know worked. So we know when we click on those, it's gonna fire an event. But what we need to know really is what sector the user has clicked on. Sector from this list here. Now, we're not currently storing any information against each of the sprite components. They are just a sprite with an actual image or not, as the case may be. And therefore, we somehow need to figure out how to get the name. Now, perhaps the easiest way, given what we've got, is to take this effective solution that we have here and run it backwards. So we start with the name of the sprite, we find from that, from the key, the values, and then we find from that, we find the keys, and then from that we can find the value, which is our sector. It's a bit awkward, but we should be alright. But that said, the first thing we want to do is get the select mark in the right place. So we can set the location select mark. So can we set the location? Set relative location. And just work it from one, get relative location. Put that into there. Teleport it and tie it up. Compile and so the event occurred, but our select mark is probably invisible. Probably because in this code we're hiding them all. So because we don't want to just it'll be difficult to special case that, it'll be difficult to put that somewhere else. We could perhaps create another group, maybe. Yeah, maybe that will work. And then we can put all of those into that group. Oh, that one needs to be stationary. Put them in there. And that can be leave it as a default name. I can't think of a good name for it. So we switch the default group scene root to this one, and we use that one over here as well. And make sure the select mark is visible. Yep. So if we compile and play, our select mark is now shown. And see if that actually worked when we click that one. No, it still doesn't move it. It's a bit odd. Let's find out. So we have a location for our the component we've touched, current value number 12. And we're setting the location on our select mark, which is a target. Don't know why that's not working, but we'll do. So because we will need to repeat this for each of them, and we can't Can we tie things up like that? No, we can't give that multiple inputs. We're going to have to take that and put it into a function. So create a new function. Set selected sector. The select mark's always going to be the same, but the paper sprite is the one thing we need to pass into here. So we need an input, call it sector, paper sprite, scene component object reference. Probably because we don't convert it. Location. Okay. Scene component. Let's try that one instead. Get relative location. Don't know what these little bobbles are. Never mind. That's the little function we need. And then over in the event graph, when we click on something, we just want to call that function with the appropriate input. We might want to do other things moving forwards, but for now, we just want to set the right place. So now when we play this, we can see the events are firing correctly, but our select mark isn't moving. So we'll take the top click. Yep, that didn't do anything, so we'll go over here and print string that one as well. So when we click it, we get the X, Y, Z coordinates of the map part and the X, Y, Z coordinates of the other part, and it doesn't move. Maybe it's got something to do with the fact that it's set to stationary, and maybe the new position is ignored. Okay, that was it. So one thing we do need to do is we are setting the full set, but that puts the Z index to the same. So if we go back into the minimap and the viewport, we can see that our grass area is on Y of 5 and our select mark is on Y of 6. That makes sure that it's always shown in front, but when we're setting the location in here, we are always going to be setting it to the same. So we actually want to break this link, split it into its components. I think it's create location. Oh no, create vector. Make a vector. Yeah, get the right command. So we want to set the X and the Z, but we want to, is that right? That's not right, is it? Back in the viewport, make sure we're getting the right numbers. Yeah, we want to set the X and the Z and leave the Y as 5, or 6 in this case. Close the function. And the Y needs to be 6. That means that it's not going to move behind our sector map piece. Now when we play, we should see that goes into the right place, more or less, and the right place there. So it's slightly off because of the fact that the mark has a bit of a shadow. It looks like it's consistently slightly to the left, So we can resolve that by simply adding an additional X value, I think. Again, go back into the viewport. And 11. Move the wrong one. That's 10. Yeah. So the we can see that it's currently over the 1111 place, which is 1058, and it's actually on -9, 6 and 8, so it's always kind of one lower on the x-axis. So we can just apply that here. That one there. Oh no, it's a float, so we don't want to minus an integer. Want to take one away, and that should make it line up correctly now. Oh, not quite. It's actually -1, not +1. Go again. There you go. So it now lines up correctly. I think, yep, looks about right in each place. And get rid of that debug string print that we've got over in the event graph. Don't need any of that. Now we just need to make sure that we've got something selected by default. Looks a bit awkward, given the fact that it's floating around in nowhere. So what we can do, I think I saw today there's a do once flow control. So perhaps the answer is simply, so that goes all the way back to the break there, joins up to there. Don't actually know, because if it only does it once, does that mean it's not going to not going to come back here very often, is it? Sequence. Maybe this is what we need. So on the first iteration, it's going to do the do once, and then on subsequent ones it's not. That means that the first time it finds a match, it's going to run this code, and this code is going to call our set selected function, set selected sector function, and loop background when it's done, and it's going to set it to this sprite component. Now hopefully that will mean our first sprite is selected, and we can prove that works by simply changing around these two values, because it doesn't matter which order these are, so long as the numbers and then the names are correct. But that means our piece that's accessible from the top, thus the bottom one, is actually going to be selected by default. So that working correctly. We'll put them back though, because it makes much more sense than being this way round. So that's that piece. We will have to tie up all the click events to all the other pieces. Don't think. Yeah. So our paper grouped sprite has a click event and a component, but I bet the component is always going to be the paper group sprite. But let's find out. Get name. What did we use before to get the name of it? Get object name. Object name. And then, so just trying to see if now we've added this grouped sprite object, we can capture the event for the individual item clicked, which would mean that we wouldn't have to create multiple event listeners for all of the different events that we want to handle with our world, but I'm not sure it's going to work. No. We don't see any strings being printed. If we play it again, now we're in this view, we can see that that clicked event doesn't get triggered. So it doesn't look like we can capture it on the top level. Don't think there's anything in here. Nope. Nope. No, it doesn't look like there's anything in the group sprite that looks like there's any kind of propagation of events. So we're going to be stuck with handling the event individually. But again, I'm going to do some research to make sure that there's not a better way to do it. Otherwise, we're going to have 16 click events, potentially 16 hover events, and then potentially 16 unhover events, and so on and so forth. And that's going to be quite a lot of events. So the final thing we actually wanted to do was get that selection up to the game level, so we can change our sector. Hopefully we can get that done fairly quickly now we've got all the pieces. We don't know, again, we don't know what sector we've clicked on. We just know we're putting the mark over the image. It doesn't know that it's over the top or the bottom or any of the pieces. So we're definitely going to have to figure that out. And we can figure it out using the similar logic that we've got here that applies it, but just working backwards. So we're going to create a function for this, because again we're going to have to repeat it for all of our click events. So we're going to call that function get selected sector. We're actually saying name because that's what we're actually going to return from this function, and the output is going to be a name, and the input is going to be the same as what our input was for the selected function, which was a scene component. We'll only work on the top branch for now, till we get this all tied up. So now we've got our name, well, we kind of will have our name. We want to trigger an event that we can capture on the map level. Custom event. That's not going to work. Yeah, so I think for this it's actually the dispatcher that we want. Order on selected, and call it, and the event do we call it get? Probably probably takes longer to find the thing from this list than it would to have defined it myself. Definitely, since for some reason it's not there. So name, and that value. So we call the event, and what we'll do for now is pretend that we've actually got the top value from our function, just so that we can work on the next bit. Make sure that that's all right before we spend all the time tying all the logic together to actually get the name from what we've selected. So in the game, we want to go to the level blueprint, this one here, open the blueprint, don't know why some of them work slightly differently, but there we go. So in our level blueprint, we are going to need a reference to our minimap. So we should be able to just drop that in there. And we want to reference the event that we had before, bind event to unselected, and then add custom event, moving everything around there. And again, we'll just quickly prove that all of these bits and pieces are in the right place by tying things up. So we don't know about the widget, but we definitely want to do the camera and then listen to that event on the minimap. Just put this over there. Like that. So now hopefully when we click on our type, we should get us a top value here. So it's only when we click on the top, because we've only tied up the top, it's only giving us the top value because we've hard coded it, but at least we've got it. Now we can get a reference to our sector, drop that in here, and our sector that we worked on some time ago now, sector blueprint, has a function already called render map, and in there we give it a map, and a map was our old naming convention for this. We'll obviously have to change it, but for the time being it's got a function called render map. So in here we can call that function render map. Don't need to print the string anymore because we know that it's right, and we call it on the event, and then that changes. It did change, it's not complete yet because we're only over doing the top, so we'll jump back over here and we'll basically just again copy all of these things, make that bottom. So I think we're actually going to do it the wrong way around, because that is actually the top, because we enter from the top, and that's the bottom. Get that the right way around first time this time, kind of first time. And that didn't seem to work. Top is that one, bottom is that one. Save, save. Maybe we'll just print a string. Make sure everything's compiled and saved. Play. So it's only printing when we get the bottom, and we're already seeing the bottom, so I'm not quite sure why that is. What did we miss? In the minimap, oh, we missed that. Doesn't help if we don't connect it up. So there we go. The sector map now represents the sector we click on. We obviously have hard-coded the sector names for this map, but now we can just quickly sort that out. So we want to get the names from the function, and we're passing into the function our scene component. Now, scene component's got an object name. Again, I'm not quite sure that we're using the object name right, or we're using it when we shouldn't, but it is working for now, so we'll keep using it. And that returns us a string. Now this is going to be 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, so on and so forth, and they are actually going to, those values are actually going to be not there in our minimap, in our event graph. The same values and stuff that we get from the data table. So we can take those two pieces, put them in our selected. So we know which the island is. The island's coming from the variables here, and we use our island data table. So we're getting the island row. If we go back over here, we can see that this one's what we've got selected here, and the map is going to be all our pieces, but we know what key we want from it. So all we need to do is call find given that string value, and it will convert that to a name. Oh, it's already a string. That's okay then. Thought it was a name. Oh no, I made it a string. String to a name. Yes. Getting confused, but yes. This sector object name is 0, 1, 1, 2, whatever this value is, which is the string value for our islands. In this case, 12, 22, etc. So we get that. The return value, if it's found it, should be a boolean. So the boolean is going to be true, false if we found it, and the value is going to be something. In theory, we should check that we have found it, but because we shouldn't really get here into this function without already having a sector that we can click on, etc., there shouldn't be any real risk. But that's one thing that's said quite often, and then it turns out to be wrong later on when something else changes. But for now, we'll go with it, and we'll just return the name that we've got. And that should mean that when we play, we still get, well, we kind of get it. It's completely wrong when we select the top one, and it's even worse when we select the bottom one. So the function, where were we? Minimap. What we'll do is we'll just put a breakpoint in here. Click on the bottom. So it's given us this event. Again, half the problem is not tying things up properly. We need to tie that one up as well. And now play. So we click the bottom one, remove that breakpoint, and resume, and click the top one. So now the sector is being corrected correctly. The circle in the middle is some default component that our game has added, one of these many things. I think we can clean some of that up quickly by going to our player controller, opening the blueprint, going to the class settings, class settings. Oh no, it's not on the player controller, is it? It's in the game mode. So we have session, player state class, player controller. I think maybe the camera's not being set up correctly, or it's putting a default camera in there. I think actually we can't. Can't clear all of them. So I don't think that's going to work, but I can figure out why we're getting those default things and go through clearing them. It's made some difference, but I think it's just sometimes it puts the thing in front of us and sometimes it doesn't. But nonetheless, we have our selection working. We'll get rid of that print string now. That was in the game there. And now we can see that we kind of go through how easy it is just to add another land. So we can go another island either. We'll go to the island. We've already got in our islands the green and the white map defined. So we can take the name of that, and this is kind of currently all driven from the minimap. Really, the minimap is saying which island we are, but that's probably the wrong place. That should really be at the level, not the minimap. And then the minimap should receive it, and the sector should receive the sector that's selected by default. But for now, we'll change the default map to Chile or Silla. And if we play, it kind of doesn't look right. Nothing's there. Luckily, it didn't break. I guess that's a good thing. It just didn't do anything. Now we just need to define that map. We have the game open here, so we can select that map, see what it looks like. It's much more complicated than the one we're currently working with. Just have to rearrange the windows a bit because it keeps going behind it. So we can define the elements. Well, we have to do them one at a time. So there's 0 zeros up here, just kind of right into the top left hand corner, and they go from there. So that would be we know that that's 1 2 because that's the one we used before, so that would be 1 1, and it's a right bottom piece based on the logic that we've defined previously. We're talking about the open accessible faces of the map piece and working clockwise. So the next piece, which will be our 12, will be our bottom and left. So if that's 1 2 and 1 1, that'll be 2 1, and it's top right. This one's all 4, so it's top, right, bottom and left. 2 3 is simply left, and finally 3 2 is just top. So we know we've defined them here, but we also know that they aren't defined within the sectors yet. And we need to define them for the images to show up. So we can, and we know they're the white ones, probably most of the white ones. So it should be fairly quick to do. So I can arrange the windows in a way that I can see all the bits that we need. So we need the first one, and that's the right bottom. Now again, we need to have the elements for each of the different types. So it's one for the green, one for the desert, the grass, the mud, and the snow. So it's always going to be the third element, and that's just going to be number 19. Now we need bottom left. So again, just add the 3 for the desert, the grass, the mud. So 4 elements in total. And this will be 21. So let's just confirm we're working correctly. I think that should be all we need to see those first two pieces. And aside from the fact that the slate isn't correctly defined from the start, as soon as we've selected some pieces, as soon as we select some pieces we've attached the events to, it does update correctly. So we can do one more actually. Stop. Back over there. We'll do the cross section, this one here, which is top right bottom left. Add our 4 element pieces. Select island 22. Play the game. So now we should be able to select the top piece, which gives us the bottom left sector view, and the bottom piece, which gives us a full open area. So we can see that the logic's working, all the pieces are in the right place. We've got to fix the default selection to make sure that the slate represents what's selected by default, and we need to finish off all the bits, all the sectors, basically fill this entire table in. But obviously I'm not going to do that while streaming because it's a lot of the same, and it'll be very repetitive and boring for most people to watch. And define all the islands. Again, I'm not actually going to do all of that until we're confident that this all the pieces that we've put in place are actually going to work, because again, it will be boring to stream, but it'll also be tedious to do more than once if we find that there's a problem here. So I'll probably fill in enough so we can get the first 3 islands working, which obviously is the one we've already done. This one down here, which is just 2x2 in the green, and this one in the snow. We'll get all of them working, and then we'll continue on past all the island stuff and confirm that the next kind of gameplay elements actually work before I go through and define all 28 islands across all 10 epochs, because that's quite a lot of data entry that I don't want to do more than once. But as I say, we've got quite a lot of the map-based, sector-based interface part done, in terms of actually showing the gameplay level. So that's where we're going to stop for today. Should be back tomorrow. I'll fill in the lands for the snow one as we see, and tie up all the events for the other bits between now and then, hopefully. And tomorrow we will probably start looking at the main menu section, which is really kind of the primary interaction for the game, and we'll see what we can do with that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you stop by again. Good night for now.